Poland is being pressured by the EU to make a decision on whether or not to stay within the European Union. The EU has threatened to kick out Poland and Hungary for some time now, but this is different. Because now the EU wants to keep Poland from selecting the judges that they want, because it could go against what the EU wants. Poland's justice minister has called this illegal blackmailing, but nevertheless, if Poland do not submit, the EU will throw heavy financial sanctions on the country. So the question is the EU pushing away member nations like Poland and Hungary on purpose, and what happens if they succeed? Alright, welcome to the channel, guys. This is something that's been on my mind for some time now, how the EU is potentially pushing away certain countries. These countries like Poland and Hungary, they have one thing in common, and it's that they are very conservative in their politics, and it seems to fit less and less with a more and more progressive European Union. So this new conflict between Poland and the EU is happening because Poland is creating a new judicial system that could see the government be able to fire certain judges. The EU is moving pretty aggressively against Poland on this issue because they say that it has a chance to undercut the separations of power within Poland. But you get a sense that it's also because it has a chance to actually undercut the EU law within Poland. So Ziobro, the justice minister of Poland, is saying that this law is very much needed because right now some judges are feeling like they are above the law. So he has some very strong words to the EU for trying to intervene in the Polish justice system. So this is what he's saying, right? Check this out. Ziobro told a newspaper that he was a staunch opponent of succumbing to the illegal blackmail of the EU. The belief that the EU is a good uncle and gives us money and that we should accept all of its demands at all costs is propaganda and false, he said. He added that although he thought Poland should be in the EU, its membership should not continue regardless of all consequences. So I think for a long time the problem was that the EU started out being like mostly about trades, but then it became something much bigger that almost has more power in some ways over countries than countries themselves have. The EU laws in many cases supersede the laws of the member nations. It kind of makes sense when you talk about trade. It kind of makes sense that everyone is trading with an agreed upon set of rules, right? But what happens when the EU is like growing bigger and it becomes more liberal in its ideology? I think it's been moving more and more to the left, the EU. So that's why we're seeing all of these conservative countries being forced to make a decision on their EU membership. What happens when so-called conservative traditional values are no longer welcome? For me, it's not so much an issue of right or left, but it's a matter of the EU taking a stance at all on things that are by nature political, right? So Ziobro talks about this as well in the article. He says that that he railed against the EU for allegedly promoting LGBT ideology and for allowing refugees to enter the bloc. He said two nations, Poland and Hungary, stood in the way of the EU's effort to create a common federal state and blur cultural differences. We are victims of a brutal political attack by EU institutions, he said. So he feels like Poland and Hungary are being pressured because they aren't like most other EU member nations from Western Europe, that these new values like immigration into Europe, that they can't conform to these values that sometimes are very new also within the EU, that they just can't keep up. If you watch my other videos, you know that I'm very much in favor of enforcing borders, that everything should be done according to the law. Europe just can't be this place where we have uncontrolled immigration, and it's not because I'm against immigrants coming into Europe, but it has to be done legally. As long as it's being done legally through a democratically elected system where people vote and have a chance to have their voices heard, as long as it's the majority setting the law, then I'm completely fine with it. I just want democracy to work. I don't want anything to be done illegally. So Poland, among other things, is known for being pretty tough on immigration, so they feel like the EU is forcing their hand as well on that issue. The problem from the EU perspective is that Poland has taken in literally hundreds of millions of euros to deal with migrants. That money doesn't come without attachments from the EU. So if you're the EU, you look at this and go, well, we gave you this money, you should take in like your share of migrants. So in some ways that's fair, right? Like I think both sides can make a pretty good argument for the case. Another thing that's separating Poland from huge parts of the EU is the issue of the LGBT debate, and obviously it's the same case with Hungary. I won't go too much into it because it's one of those issues on YouTube that even if you look at it neutrally, just from both sides of the argument, it's one of those things that gets you banned faster than almost anything else. One thing I do want to say though is that recently the EU, against the will of the Hungarian and the Polish people, have declared Poland and Hungary a so-called LGBT freedom zone. They are claiming that the LGBT community should have their special rights in those countries. So I never understood that. Like I'm all for equal rights for anyone. Every human being should have equal rights. But special rights for the LGBT community, I never got that. Because I don't think you should have special rights because you identify in a certain kind of group, right? Because where does that leave everyone else? On this whole issue of the, people always say LGBT rights, to me I just consider it human rights. I don't see you as being in an LGBT group and therefore you should have some kind of special rights that no one else has. I think you should have all of the same rights that everyone else have. So when the EU declares Poland and Hungary a LGBT freedom zone and say that they should have special rights within those countries like they do everywhere else, that's what they're saying, right? I don't get it. They should have normal human rights. They should just have rights like everyone else. But even saying something like that I think is obvious, is considered an unfashionable opinion now. So let's just get back on track. All right, so today Poland announced that they will give in on this whole issue about judges to the EU. Poland is to introduce changes to its controversial disciplinary chamber for judges, the head of the ruling party announced on Saturday. We will abolish the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court in the form in which it currently operates, and the subject of the dispute with the EU will thus disappear. So that's them saying, okay, so we don't want the financial sanctions. We're just going to do what you guys want. And this happened really fast, by the way, like in the matter of one day. So it really shows you the power that the EU has with these sanctions that they will put on their member nations if they don't get in line. I know it might seem that way, but I actually don't know which side to pick on this issue, so that's not really the point of this video. The point is that I'm seeing a growing discontent with member nations that are not like everyone else. I saw the most recent poll of the Polish people on whether or not they should stay within the EU, and it's the vast majority wants to stay within the EU. But the polls are trending towards more people wanting to leave the EU, and the reason they give every time is that the EU started out being something when they joined, but it's now becoming something different, that the EU is adopting policies that they just can't keep up with or just disagree with flat out right. These policies are often political in nature and therefore by definition divides people, member nations, into two groups. So that's my concern. The EU will grow and it will get bigger. And as it grows, my concern is that it won't tolerate any other viewpoint than the approved one. It's annoying because most of the time I find myself agreeing with what the EU is doing, but I think you and I both know what happens when a huge, powerful organization like this one, what happens when it begins to force its member nation into submission just because they disagree politically. I'm telling you, it never ends well. Thank you guys for watching and see you in the next one.